So welcome to my work solutions. It's the Edexcel Higher GCSE from the November 2023 series, and as you can see, it's the paper 2. So let's go. First question, extremely standard, got to be honest. So why have they moved them across? Why have they left a space? It's because they want you to take the midpoint, for example 2.5, and multiply it by 8. So I can't bother writing them all out. So 7.5 times 2. And off you go. So we get 75, 70. And now they get a bit bigger, 270. And the final midpoint, 27.5, multiplied by 18 for 495. And now I actually read that part A didn't need that, but who cares? So modal, most common, highest frequency is 18. So the modal class, write it down exactly as you see it represented in the table. Part B is pretty much done though, because we've got our midpoints multiplied by frequencies. So first it says work out an estimate for the total length. So in other words, bit of a red herring. Normally you have to divide by 50 because they're asking you to estimate the mean. Actually, not here. They're just wanting you to total those numbers, so be careful. 945 is the correct answer here. Number 2. So find the value of W. As you can see, W is the hypotenuse of the right side triangle. So it's going to have to be a bit of Pythagoras. And because there's no angles anywhere, it's double Pythagoras. So the side on the left triangle that we don't know is B to C. So we work out B to C, 10's the hypotenuse, so it's 10 squared minus 8 squared. That gives us root of 36. In other words, a nice easy 6. But it's not 6 we take forward, because what we need to find DE is, yes, it's 14 squared, or it's not 6 squared because it's E to C that we need to use. We need to add on the 5. So it's 11 squared, and we're going to square root. It wants the answer to one decimal place. I got 17.804. So obviously one decimal place. 17.8. Number 3, bit of cheating because me and technology are rubbish. So reflect the shape. I've drawn the line y equals x. You get a mark for that. And when you reflect it, don't forget, if you're going to do it by counting, make sure you count corner to corner. And do it by posh dot to dot. A good old tilt of the head, 45 degrees, will often let you know that it's the right size, right way up and all that malarkey, because sight is a good way of double checking on reflections. Your eyes are normally pretty good. Part B, describe fully. So it's not the same size. So you've got to have, for one of your 3 marks, you've got to state the obvious. It's an enlargement. Also, make sure you get it the right way round. Are we going from B to A or A to B? So it's getting bigger. So we have a scale factor. Pick a side, that's 2. The corresponding side is 6. So we have a scale factor of 3. It's been trebled. But final bit, we need the centre. So that's where the rays come in handy, and the centre of enlargement, the rays cross at 7, 2. 1 mark for each bit you write down. Question 4, solving. Now when we're solving, never a fan of fractions, get rid of them. How do I get rid of divide by 6? Multiply the left by 6 and multiply everything on the right hand side by 6. Now let's add 30 to both sides while subtracting 2x from both sides. And X can have one of lots of answers: 35 over 10, 7 over 2, or 3.5, whichever you prefer. Part B, laws of indices. When you are dividing, you must subtract the powers. Question C, there are 3 parts to this. Do each one in turn. Raise them all to the power of 4, one by one. So 2 to the power of 4, mental arithmetic or calc, gives you 16. And when you're doing your laws of indices, a power raised to a power means multiply those powers. 3 4s are 12. And for the K, 5 4s are 20. Part D, kind of a back to front question. I would say multiply both sides by y to the 7. Because I am a big fan of having everything, a bit like part A. I like it all on one level. And when you only look at the powers, and multiply means add, we can say that on the left-hand side, 5 plus the n must equal 12 plus the 7. In other words, n has to be 14. Number 5, wordy ratio, but actually wordy joined up connected ratios, whatever you want to call it. Never a fan of these questions always move left to right. I'm much more of a fan of saying flour to the butter is 6 to 5. Butter to the sugar is 3 to 2. We use 120 grams of sugar. Your multiplier is 60. So we do the same for B. That gives us 180. That now means we can take it across to here. So what's our multiplier? Grab your calc, do a divide. For this one, it's 36. We need to do 6 times 36. That tells us that Avril uses 216 grams of flour. Number 6, show. As I've said on loads of videos, show means do. So let's turn the first one into improper. And the second one into improper. In other words, keep the denominators the same. Find your numerators by doing big times bottom plus top. 3 7s are 21, plus the 3 on top. 2 3s are 6, plus the 2 on top. But now we all like a bit of KFC, so keep, flip, and change. And at this stage, you can either do top times top and cancel it down, or like I always prefer, keep the numbers as small as you can. Divide the top by 8. Divide the bottom by 8. Now I'll do top times top, bottom times bottom, keeping one eye on the answer. 7 goes into 9 once, with a remainder of 2. And that's enough working out to have shown, proven, whatever. Next, we're buying a boat, but the value of the boat depreciates, so we treat the value as capital. Depreciating by 8% means your multiplier, take the 8% away from 100, 92, or in other words is a decimal, 0.92. And we're going for 3 years nearest dollar. So on my calc, I get 20,868.8384. So nearest dollar, 20,869. Number 8. This is one of those mean questions where you have to multiply because they've done the dividing. They've actually found the mean for you. So top line, 8 matches, the mean is 6. 8 sixes mean that the team has scored 48 goals in those 6 matches. The team plays 2 more matches. All right, so we've gone from 8 matches now to 10 matches, etc., and scores K goals in each match. All right, so the mean number of goals in the 10 matches is 7. So there's the new total. So we can say that the original 48 goals plus the K goals per 2 matches gives us 70. We've set the equation up. We can solve it. Take away 48 from both sides and dividing both sides by 2. We get K to be 11. Goalfest. Number 9. As soon as anything says find an equation, your brain needs to say mx plus c. Now the c is actually already done for you because the c is the intercept, the y-intercept, or in other words, it's where x equals 0. X equals 0, the intercept is -3. There's no work it out, that's just a bit of knowledge. The work it out is about the gradient. The way you work out the gradient, changing y's over changing x's. So change means difference, difference means subtract. So 0 take away -3 on the top, 2 take away 0 on the bottom. That's our gradient. Feel free to change it to 1.5 if you want. Number 10. So we're told the area. So if I said to you, how do we find the area of this hexagon? You would start by splitting it. And how you split it is entirely up to you. Couple of rectangles and a triangle, rectangle and trapezium. Personally, I'm always a fan of avoiding trapeziums if possible because they get a little bit too complicated. So I'm going to go for that sort of way there. I'm going to call them RS and T. A, B, C and X have already been used, so let's go RST. So the easiest one to find in there is definitely S. S is a triangle. It's a half times, what's the base? Well, this distance across the top is x plus 2. Across the bottom is x plus 6. The difference is 4. We do a similar thing vertically. It's 25 top to bottom. We subtract the 8 and the 7. So the height of the triangle is 10. In other words, S is 20. Let's do the next easiest. That's T. That's that square looking thing, but we can't assume that. It's probably a rectangle. We know its height. It's 7. We just need to know its width. We've already done the width. It's the same as the triangle. So that was all so easy. The trickiest bit is the R. But let's start building it up. So total area is going to be 20 plus 28 plus R, which is a rectangle. Its height is 25. Its width is x plus 2. And all them together are 258. So now we just solve it. Let's subtract 48 from both sides while we expand the brackets. 25x plus 50. And now we can subtract 50 from both sides. And if you divide 160 by 25, you can either go with 8 and 2/5, 32 over 5. I'll go with decimals, 6.4. Number 11, good old, reasonably straightforward probability trees, but do take care because the probabilities change. So let's do the easy bit. That's 5/16. That's 11/16. In box Y, 7 out of 20 are red. So let's get them in. So 13 out of 20 aren't. Nice couple of marks. Work out the probability that Sid takes 2 crayons that are red or both not red. So red is the top, not red is the bottom. Well, we've got enough. We can work it out because red is 5/16 times 7/20, and NN, bottom, we're adding is 11/16 times 13/20. Feel free to do it separately. I did it all in one go. 178 over 320. If you went for separate, my calc spat out the cancelled down version, 89 160ths. On we go. Number 12. So we've got a powers question. What's the connection between 2 and 4? They are powers of 2. So you should straight away write everything as a power of 2. So 4 is 2 squared. But that's all to the power of 5. 4 is 2 squared, but that's all to the power of x. So firstly, don't forget that power to a power means multiply. That has already cropped up. And don't forget that when you multiply, you add the powers. And if they're equal, we can simply say that 7 added to 10 must equal 2x. And there we go. 2x is 17. X is 17 over 2. I'll carry on my themes of decimals though. Part B. Feel free to use your calc, but it's our laws of indices power to a power question. If you want to do 125 to the power of 2/3 on your calculator, feel free. If you want to cube root it in your head to get 5, then square it in your head to get 25. No one cares. No one likes a show off, but it's 25 either way. Then we've got power to a power, so multiply. So the power of P is 6 times 2/3, which is 4. And the power of Y is 24 to the power of 2/3, which is 16. On we go. So there's 11 people. Now, if you wanted the median, you would add 1 to get 12 and halve it to get the 6th person. We don't want that. We want quartiles, so quarters. So we still add 1 to get 12, but a quarter of 12 is the 3rd person, and 3/4 of 12 is the 9th person. And to find the range of these quartiles, biggest take away smallest, we get 9. Number 14. So they'd helpfully already drawn the bottom equation for us. We needed to draw the top equation. I don't like how it looks though. I always think it's easier if it's mx plus c. So that tells us that the gradient is 1 and the intercept is 2. So because the vertical and horizontal scales are the same, it's corner to corner for a gradient of 1 and its intercept is 2. So we draw the line Bosch, and where do they cross? -1 for x, up 1, so +1 for y, and we move on. Number 15. extremely bog standard. These crop up all the time. You'd be daft not to revise them. I know some people prefer to just simply go X, 10x, 100x, 1000x. That's fine, but you don't need one of those steps. So I'm going to avoid that. So always move it up so that the recurring is straight after the decimal point. And we want to have the same again. And the only way we can do that is by budging them up by 2 decimal places. In other words, multiplying by 100. So that budges it up to 372, and you times that by 100. You can bypass and go straight to 1000. But yeah, let's be honest, who cares? It's all pretty quick anyway. It's not like you've found a massive shortcut. We're going to do bottom take away top. 990x is 369, and so x is the 369 over 990, and it's pretty obvious what that cancels down to. Yep, 41 over 110. Part B, express and show you working clearly, so you could use your calc a little bit. So on your calc if you wanted to, but I'm going to do it without a calc. Root of 125. And I'm doing this like it was a show question. I mean, it says show your working, but it's not quite a show question. That's root 25 root 5. In other words, 5 root 5. Could have used your calc to get there, but as I say, still. Square number that goes into 80. The biggest square number, because 4 works, but 16's better. So that'll give you 4 root 5. So on the numerator, we get 9 root 5. On the denominator, root 3. But as you can see, the form they want it in, they want the root 3 on the bottom gone. So we times it by root 3 over root 3. Top times top gives us 9 root 15. Bottom times bottom gives us root of 9, which is 3. And that cancels down 9 over 3. So 3 root 15, you might think is the right answer. I'm afraid you would be wrong. Don't forget to always check back. There's no number in front of their radical. They don't want a number in front. We need to take that 3 inside. And the only way you can do that is remembering that root 9 is 3. And now we can combine 9 15s, 135. Notice it says it's an integer. Doesn't mention anything about it because it's not prime. It's got a 5 as a factor. It wanted it as root 135. I'm afraid if you've left it like that, that's 2 out of 3. You've dropped a mark. On we go. Again, I'm on about bog standard questions. These crop up all the time as well. Pick any 2 brackets, get them multiplied and simplified. So 2x times x, 3 times negative 5, and for the x terms, 3x take away 10x. There we go. So I always expand the first 2 brackets by either loops or sight, but the final bit, there's 6 loops going off. I don't like to risk it. Do a grid. Keep it safe. They're 3 marks. You want all 3, not 1 or 2. So, top grid, top part, let's times everything by x. Minus 7x squared minus 5x. Let's times everything by positive 4. 8x squared minus 28x minus 20. Now let's simplify. 2x cubed, x squared terms, sorry, we've got 8 of them, we take away 7 of them, we're left with just the 1. Negative 28x, negative 5x, we're down to minus 33. And the constant on the end stays the same. Number 17, another standard one. As soon as you see errors and bounds, crack on with 8.3 up and down by half the rounding amount. Let's do C. That's 2 up and down by half the rounding amount. We've got Y as well. 15 up and down by 2.5. Yes, half of 5. And now, whoops, it says work out the upper bounds. So we want the biggest possible value of P. Looking at this sum, the way we get it, because we're adding and multiplying here, there's no taking or dividing, so it's actually quite an easy one. We want the biggest A multiplied by the sum of the biggest C added to the biggest Y. So we're picking the biggest for all of them. So big A is 8.35, big C is 2.5, big Y is 17.5. The brackets give us 20, so we're not even going to need to round our answer off. It's going to be a nice, doesn't even say, but it's a nice looking round answer of 167. On to 18. Now it doesn't say that it is differentiation. That's one of those knowledge bits. You've got to be able to go and revise if you didn't know that velocity is the very definition of speed is the rate at which your position changes over time. You could be further away, you could be nearer. So the idea is it's the rate at which your distance changes with respect to time. And how do we differentiate? You bring the power down. So 3 times 2 is 6. You take 1 off the power. You bring the power down. 2 times 5 is 10. Take 1 off the power. 6t, when you differentiate a number like that, sorry, a term like that, the t disappears. You're just left with the number. And when you differentiate negative 5, that fully disappears. But then you've got your next stage, because the definition of acceleration. How fast is something or how slow is decelerating, accelerating? At the end of the day, the definition of acceleration is the rate at which your velocity or speed, whatever you want to call it, no one cares, changes with respect to time. So it's differentiate again. Bring the power down, take 1 off the power. Minus 10t becomes minus 10. 6 disappears. Find the value of t when the acceleration is 5. All the tough stuff's done. Now find t. Add 10 to both sides. We're there, aren't we? Divide both sides by 12 for 1.25. Onwards. Number 19. We want to exclude a value from the domain of G. Well, what you never want to do with functions is square root a minus or divide by 0. We do not want the bottom to equal 0. What value of x would make that 0? 4.5. Then all hell would break loose if we divide by a 0. Part B, find the f of g of 4. In other words, stick 4 into g. So that gives us 5 over 8 minus 9, which is -1. What does that give us? -5. And we need to stick that into f. So we times it by 5 and add 7. Timesing it by 5, adding 7, gives us -18. Next, a very tricky, if you don't know it, it's virtually impossible. We need to find the inverse function. To find the inverse function, you need to make x the subject. You need to get x on its own. And that's one of them knowledge things. How do you rearrange a quadratic like so? Well, the only way to do that, because no matter how much you try to take an x out or muck around with it, there's only one way of doing it, and that's completing the square. We take a 3 out. I always like to leave the constant on the end. Now we can complete the square inside the square brackets. So we halve the number next to x, we square it and minus it. Now we can expand the brackets and simplify. So we get 3 times the brackets. And 3 times -4 is -12. Don't forget to add on the 8. But the key to it is we can now rearrange it to make x the subject. So let's get rid of the -4 by adding 4 to both sides. Let's divide both sides by the 3, because it's 3 times the brackets. We're getting closer. Let's get rid of these brackets by square rooting both sides. And adding 2 to both sides. So we have indeed made x the subject. The thing to notice is we don't need to include the negative square root, because as you've seen above, inverse functions and stuff like that, there are, when you square root, as we know, if you've seen a bit of A-level, you'll know about square rooting. It needs to be a 1-1 function. If that doesn't mean anything to you, ignore it. We don't need the minus square root, quite frankly. And final bit, when you've found the inverse function, don't forget to flip around the x's and the y's. So I've got my electronic pen, which is a jumbo crayon, so I'm just going to slide it up here. It's 2 plus the root of x plus 4, because we've changed them around, over 3. Easy to get bogged down in that, why we reject the minus. Sometimes it's quite obvious, but rarely. Don't forget, by the way, it's normally 3 marks for completing a tricky square. So there's going to be a fourth. The 4th mark is rarely for rearranging, so they're not bothered about that minus being rejected, if we're honest. Anyway, on we go. Number 20. As you can see, I've drawn a little pointer on in blue. So we've got an equilateral triangle, 10 by 10 by 10, but more importantly, it tells us that that is 5. Even more importantly, that is 60. So that is 30. So you actually know a lot more than you think you do. First job, let's find the area of the whole triangle. So ABC. The whole lot. It's easier than you think, because it's a half. A is 10, B is 10. Sine the angle between them. In your calc, or even mental arithmetic if you want to show off, 25 root 3. Now, how do we find the area of the circle in the middle? Well, to find the area of a circle, you need the circle's radius. That radius happens to be the opposite. 5 is the adjacent, and the angle is 30. Yep, it's a tower. Circle the opposite, which is the radius, and on your calc, we need to press tan 30, because it's still a tower, tan 30. Close brackets if your calc is a smart aleck, and we multiply it by the adjacent, which is 5. Staying in surd form, 5 root 3 over 3. All the hard work's done, because now to find the area of the shaded, it's the area of the whole lot minus the circle in the middle. Well, the circle in the middle is going to be pi multiplied by the radius squared. So your job is stick that in your calc. I got 17.1213. Answer to 3 significant figures, please. So 17.1. On we go. Number 21. Wordy, as you can see, says find. Now this is one of those questions where it does ask for the answer in coordinates, but as a big clue, they've already done it like that. So here we go. Top equation, the first equation, the linear. I'm going to subtract 2y from both sides. And that can now be replaced in there. So we have to square it, simplify it with the 3y squared, and it's one of them age-old questions. We need to make this equal to 0, don't we? So let's expand the brackets, square the first, square the last, times them together and double it. No, it's not squared out. Don't forget we've got a 3y squared, that's what I was thinking about, and a 13. Let's get it equal to 0. Bring the y squareds to the front. There are 7 of them. Y's, there are negative 20 of them. And numbers on the end, 25, take away 13. There are 12 of them. You could go for the AC method, but I think when there's a 12 on the end, there's lots of possibilities. I just crack on with the formula. I think it's quicker. So, 2 values of y will be given by doing minus b plus and minus the square root. B squared is 400 minus 4 lots of 7 is 28. 28 12s are 336. Because it gives us a square number here, we now know for sure it would have factorized nicely. But who cares? You might still be doing the AC method, whereas us, we're pretty much there. Because one of our answers for y is 2. And another one of our answers, slightly more awkward, 6/7. So when y is 2, we can go back to x equals, I've scrolled it off, but there we go, 5 minus 2 lots of y. So 5 minus 2 lots of 2 is 1. And same here, 5 minus 2 lots of 6/7. Going to be calc, 23/7. Onwards. So question 22, part AI. Nice easy one marker really. Find the vector O to C. How do we get from O to C? We go to B first, that's 4B. but then we take away 2b. That's why it needed simplifying, but for a's, there's only 2 of them. And that bit's done. I won't scroll down, it's nice to keep the diagram on. So for the next bit, find how we get from A to B. So A in that corner, B there. We go against the 3A with the 4B. So in other words, positive 4B, negative 3A. Now, I'll do a bit of thought process before we actually go on to, obviously, you've got this part P here, which as described earlier on, it says later on, use a vector method, find the ratio of A to P to B. Now, the main bit of this question is, and I'll do all the working out, I'll do the thinking here, then I'll do the working out on the next page. The best way for me of going about a question like this is start at A and find a couple of ways of getting to P. In other words, you can go that way and you can go other ways and so on. So let's start writing all that nonsense out. And I've got a paper copy in front of me. Obviously, feel free to be flicking back. Just can't have them side by side. It means I end up writing too small. And this is like writing with a jumbo crayon. Anyway, so let's make the statement. How do I travel from A to P? A to P is a multiple. It's probably going to be a fraction, but it's a multiple of 4b minus 3a. In other words, it's a multiple of part double I that they've just got you to get. It's a multiple of AB, or it's a fraction of AB, depending on how you want to write it. But there's another way of getting from A to P, and that's to go to O first. So A to O is minus 3A, and then travel a multiple of O to C, which you did for part I. So it's a multiple of 2A plus 2B. And now the logic really is, we've now got both of these things in terms of A and B. We can equate them because they should be the same. So if we only look at the A's, let's look at the coefficient of A's. In the top equation, if I expanded the brackets, what would be next to the A? It'd be minus 3C. But that should be the equivalent or equal to, on the bottom, what would be next to A? On the bottom, we'd have a minus 3 there, but there'd also be in here a 2k. Now let's equate the coefficients of the B vector. So on the top, if I expanded it, what would be next to the B? Answer 4C. On the bottom, what would be next to the B? Well, if I expanded it out, there'd be 2k. And hey presto, folks, you're closer to the answer than you think you are. We've now got nice simultaneous equations. I can simply, add them, subtract them, tag them, do whatever the heck you want. I'm going to take equation A and replace 2k with 4c. Adding 3 to both sides, Adding 3c to both sides, I get c to be 3/7. Now, what was c? C was the multiplier, or in other words, the fraction that referred to what I multiply A to B by. So if that is 3/7 of the line, that is 4/7 of the line. So as a ratio, we have 3/7 to 4/7, but they always want it to write it AP to PB. We just times everything by 7. The answers always look quite straightforward. The process is not. On we go. Question 23. Good old frustum, they come up all the time, but yeah, they're not as bad as you think. The key to these questions, before you read all the waffle, just look at the diagram. The key to this is, I'm not too sure what the heck that X is. But problem, I don't know what that is. But because they are similar, that 6 to that X, the large radius to the small radius, will be in the same proportion as the large height to the small height. In other words, I can write a scale factor. What do I multiply 6 by to get X? Answer, X over 6. Because if I do 6 times X over 6, the 6's cancel. So that is my scale. Now, if I apply the same logic, I can find the height by doing 15 times by the scale. In other words, in the same proportion, I've now got height to be, and if it cancels down, 5x over 2. So instead of having two unknowns, h and x, I have one unknown, x, which means it's much easier on the algebra. Now we can move on. Given that the volume of the frustum, that's the volume of the bottom bit. So we can make the statement, the volume of the frustum at the bottom, 4212 over 25 pi, will be equal to the volume of the large cone. The large cone will be 1/3 times pi times its radius squared multiplied by its height minus the volume of the top cone. And we know a little bit about it. It's going to be 1/3 times pi multiplied by the radius squared multiplied by its height, 5x over 2. Now, first of all, let's do a bit of tidying up. The pi's cancel throughout. I'm never a fan of fractions, so I am going to multiply everything by 3 while doing a bit of tidying up. So, on the left-hand side, 12,636 is that trebled. On the bottom, 25. Here, I've got 6 squared times 15. And here, I've got 5x cubed over 2. It's now quite easy to find x. Start with all that on your calc, 12,636 over 25. Take away the 540, times both sides by 2, divide both sides by 5. We get the reassuringly cubey looking 1728 over 125, both of which are cube numbers. We can cube root both sides, whoops, and x will be 12/5. Or if you prefer decimals, 2.4. They gave us a lot of room for that, didn't need it. And finally, for number 24, loads going on here. So let's just examine the top of this bit so I can save myself a bit of effort. When I take out a 5x, we are left with 9x squared minus 16. In other words, we've got difference of 2 squareds here. So when you factorise the top left numerator, you can jump to taking out the 5x and being left with 3x plus 4 and 3x minus 4. All over, let's factorise the denominator. We get 3x plus 4, they're gone, and x minus 1. But we are multiplying. Now let's combine these two. I always multiply the bottoms and cross multiply the tops. So 1 times x is 1x. 3x minus 4 times 1 is 3x plus 4. I'm going to simplify that. So I get 4x minus 4. Another thing which cancels out, got a 3x minus 4 and a 3x minus 4 and an x and an x. So now let's times the tops and tidy it up. So we've got 5 times all this nonsense. So that's 20x minus 20 all over x minus 1. We can now set that to be equal to the right-hand side. In other words, 4x plus 8 all over 5x minus 8. And let's get it all on a level. Let's times both sides by 5x minus 8. So in other words, we're expanding this bracket and this bracket. So we get 100 x squared. We get minus 20 times minus 8 is plus 160. Now we do the x terms. We've got minus 100 if we times them. And we've got minus 160. So we've got minus 260x. And if we expand the right-hand side, we've got 4x squared, 8 times negative 1. Now do the x terms. We've got negative 4x plus 8x. So in other words, positive 4x. Now if you're going to solve these, you're going to need to equal it to 0. So let's subtract 4x squared from both sides. 96x squared. Let's subtract 4x from both sides. We get minus 264x. And let's add 8 to both sides. We get plus 268. Now you could jump straight for the quadratic formula. I always like to make numbers smaller if I can. They're all in the 4 times table. So let's just divide everything by 4. It's definitely not 1. I'd be factorised. Oh, they divided by 8. Never mind, doesn't matter. That's where I started using the quadratic formula. So to find my x, it's 66. It's minus b. Square root of b squared is 4,356 minus 4ac is 4,032 all over 2a. And so the two answers I get are 7 over 4 and you get 1. But don't forget, here's the problem. Look at the denominator down here. You don't want x to be 1. If x is 1, you end up dividing by 0. So it's a bit sneaky, that, but we don't want x to equal 1. We have to reject that answer. So there's a little bit of a clue when it says, so it doesn't really say find the solutions to x or so. The fact is, I'm afraid 1 is a wrong answer. It's just 7 over 4. So that frustum and that question, couple of doozies at the end, but again, not a fair paper if you take it all into perspective. Think about the paper as a whole, not just the 2 or 3 stinkers at the end. But anyway, I hope that's helped. See you on the next one.